Hi, my name is Laurence. I'm the chair for the Tiger 21 group here in Portugal. This is a group for ultra high net worth individuals who are founders, investors, entrepreneurs, and wealth creators. I'm the latest guest on the Portugal, The Simple Life podcast. I talked to Dylan about why more and more ultra high net worth individuals are calling Portugal home and how they can benefit from the Tiger 21 community.
Welcome back. Welcome to another episode of Portugal, The Simple Life. And I'm really excited and delighted to be joined here by Laurence Tam. Laurence, bon dia. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Oh, so excited to be here. Thank you for having me on board. You have a great channel, and I just love speaking about Portugal.
Awesome. Yeah, well, then you come to the right place if you like speaking about Portugal. You know, that's what we do here. But yeah, got a cool background there, Laurence, in your podcast studio. I think you also host a podcast. Bit different to this one, but podcasting is a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, a podcast is a lot of fun. I've been doing it for quite some time now. I actually started a podcast back in about 14 years ago.
How long ago?
14 years ago.
Okay, so before it was a thing.
Before it was a thing, yeah. And that was a huge turning point back in Australia when I was doing that. And I did that for over 5-6 years, and it was a fun experience. And
Amazing.
I just got back into doing some podcasting lately.
It's good. It's good. I love it. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Laurence.
Yeah. So listen, I'm Canadian. That's where the accent comes from. If you can hear that. And I spent my growing up in Canada. Then I moved to Australia with my wife in 2002. And so our goal there was to spend about a year there to kind of just get our travel bugs. I was 27. I just graduated, and we moved over there to just experience a different world. And then we can go back to Canada and start our business. And that 2 weeks into Australia, I just fell in love with it. And I just told my wife, I'm like, maybe we should extend this 1 year to become 2 years. And 2 years became 20. And that was
Amazing.
that story. And we can kind of, dive into that. But then after that, we decided to make the move, and I'm sure we'll go into it. But we made a move to Portugal about 3 years ago. And so now that I'm in Portugal right now, I'm the chair for a group organization called Tiger 21. Tiger 21 is, organization specifically for ultra high net worth individuals. And we are usually, they're founders, they're entrepreneurs, wealth creators, and they are an organization worldwide. It's been around for 25 years, but in our group, each group in each city, we're in about 54 major cities around the world. And each city or each group is about 12 to 15 people. And we have unique conversations that are unique to those ultra high net worth individuals. Discussions, problems, issues, investments that are specific for them. And they're sort of, think of it like a personal board of directors, for your life.
Amazing. How was the, just because I haven't been to Australia. I'm originally from South Africa. So we have there is a bit of a rivalry, mostly
of course,
with sports, South Africa and Australia, but that must have been quite a shift, Canada to Aussie.
Yeah, well, as you're aware, we're part of the Commonwealth, right? So
yeah,
so we have that in common. It was a bit of a shift for sure. I went from extreme cold weather that I grew up in to extreme heat that I wasn't used to. The first day that remember the first week that I experienced 40-degree weather was pretty tough. Because we never had those experiences. But what I love about Australia is that, other than Canadians and Australians are very similar, I think, in terms of their culture and personalities. The only difference I used to say was, I always make a joke, was that their accents were different. But obviously there's a lot of fundamental differences. But for me, the transition was an inviting one. And I think that sort of led me to this path of exploring and seeing the world for what it is.
Amazing. So you've done this, you've done two big steps. Canada to Australia, other side of the world, and then back to the other side of the world for Portugal. Why Portugal? How did that all start for you?
Yeah, so it started around COVID. 2020, Australia, the lockdowns were pretty heavy, and it was quite harsh for the whole country, right? And certain states were worse. That spurred a conversation around what's life about? I think COVID did that for all of us, I would imagine. It's a reset for everybody, not necessarily to run away from something, but just more to think about life and, what's our purpose? What are we doing here? My kids were about 13 and 10 at the time, and really got me thinking, and with my wife is we love Australia. I call myself Australian because I spent so much more than, close to half my life there. And I really love that part of the world. But there was this feeling of, is this it? And so we really kind of explored about life in general, going, hey, you know what? We've been here for 20 years. We've seen everything that wanted to ever see in not just in Australia, but also the surrounding regions, the Balis, the Asia, all those things. And I saw my life flash before me in terms of I knew what house I was going to live in. I knew what life I was going to have. I knew what school my kids were going to go to. That thought process actually scared the living daylights out of me, to be honest.
Okay.
I was 47 at the time, and I just realized I'm like, you know what? That would be a great life, by the way. It would be a really, really great life. But would it be an interesting life? And that's sort of that conversation. So those 2 years really kind of went through my mind and discussions around, is there more? And every time we've come to Europe during our vacations, we've done, a couple of European trips with the kids for a month at a time. There was always something about Europe that kind of drew us here. I don't want to go back to Canada because it's way too cold. and when you spend 20 years in Australia, you don't want to go back to the cold if you have a choice.
Yeah.
And so to answer your question, I'll come back to the answer your question. There was 3 specific things of what made us decide on Portugal. So we sat down as a family and going, if we were to move, what would be the main thing we look at? And to be honest with you, which is strangely enough, weather was actually the number one thing that kind of came up, that kept on going. And so what I mean by that is that we were so blessed with sunshine, for 300 plus days in Australia, that we felt we couldn't move to a place where it didn't have a lot of sunshine. Like my wife is also has a British passport, and we thought, I don't know if I could do that. Like to live in the rain or the cloud, on majority of the year. I can't do that after spending 20 years. I mean, could, but I don't want to, right? It's not a choice that I would want to make. Definitely not going back to Canada. So we kind of looked at, well, what areas in the world that have 300 plus days of sunshine? Well, the Mediterranean was one. Maybe LA, Texas, Florida, Hawaii, those type of places. So your Mediterranean was the one thing. So then we kind of looked at, all right, well, the problem with that is that none of those countries speak English as a main language. All right. Yeah. So that was the challenge. But it's a challenge I was willing to kind of take, comparison to the life I could have had if I stayed in Australia.
Yeah.
So that contrast is like, I'd rather have a life unexplored than a life sort of exactly the same. So I chose Portugal. Well, one, obviously the visa, they had a great program for us to kind of come through. And I came through a D7 visa, and they just closed the loop on the golden visa. So we didn't come through the golden visa. And the third reason is I personally have been in Portugal about 8 years ago. I came here to do a retreat. I had a friend of mine who'd been living in Portugal. They traveled the world. They would move places every 3 months, but they settled in Portugal, in Lisbon. Yeah. And I was curious about that. He was an entrepreneur. And I go, you know what? I've never been to Portugal. I run these retreats for my clients. And so I said, why don't I do one in Portugal? And so I did. So I came over to Portugal for 5 days. This is about 8 years ago. And after my retreat, he took me around. He took me to Cascais, Quintana Marina. And he drove around. He said, Laurence, I can really see you living here. Yeah. And I'm like, I just kind of brushed it off. I'm like, nah, like my wife is never going to go for it. I did bring it up 8 years ago. My wife's like, I'm not moving to Portugal. Right. Fast forward, 5 years, COVID hits and all that stuff. Just for the audience to know, like when we moved, I'm the only one in my family who's ever been to Portugal. My wife's never moved. My kids have never seen it. Yeah, never moved there.
I was going to ask that. So you moved without having been here?
Nope. Never been here. Okay. Yeah. For me, it was 5 days. Like that's and 3 of those days I was running a retreat. So I really didn't get a good exposure. And on top of that, I bought a house online before we moved, by the way. We sold up everything. We sold our house in Australia. We sold everything. We gave away pretty much everything. We only came with half a container, which we probably didn't even need. But we bought a house here before we even moved here. So the first time my wife and the kids have ever seen, I'm also moving with my mother-in-law, by the way. The first time they've ever seen Portugal was from the airport the drive from the airport to Cascais to our
to
Airbnb.
to the
And I still remember looking at her during that time,
like
like, I'm hoping,
how's this
please, I
going?
like
Yeah, yeah.
this.
How's happy wife, happy life, you know?
Exactly. So it
Yeah.
was, yeah, so that's the move. And so, and I'll give you the third reason. The reason why I chose Portugal as well is because my experience, for the limited experience I had in Portugal, and from what I read online and watching YouTube videos, is that the Portuguese as a culture, as people, they're very friendly. They're very inviting. And one of the things around language, which I still struggle with, because I think Portuguese is very difficult to learn, especially from an English speaking, just the then
Yep.
pronunciations
Yeah, yeah.
and the wording. But the main challenge that I had was wanting to make sure my family was going to be okay moving halfway around the world, so that they are going to be accepted.
Yeah.
And from what I read so far, and this is before I moved here, of course, and it's confirmed, which is as long as you try, as long as you give it the language a go, just the bon dias, the botards, like, and to the binds, like, just asking and just trying the language, they're going to be more accepting to you. And that was like, for those three reasons are the main reasons why we chose Portugal compared to anywhere else.
Amazing. We'll talk about how it's going, how the 3 years have been, but let's just talk a little bit about the work you're doing. I mean, so did the Portuguese chapter of Tiger 21 come about because you moved?
No, actually, because I moved, um, it came up by random chance. I met,
Okay.
so I want to track back a little bit. One of the things I didn't expect, and I know we're going to get into it, but I think it's important to the story. One of the major things that I did not expect coming here, because I didn't know a single soul. My friend actually, who not convinced me, but told me about or seeded the idea of
He
moving.
planted the
He actually
seed.
moved to, yeah, he actually moved to Austin already. So there was no one here I knew. I didn't know a single
Oh,
soul.
so he had already gone back.
He's already gone back, yeah. But he's actually moved back since, but that's another story. But I didn't know anybody, basically.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, basically, I moved to a country, I don't know anybody, and
Yeah.
it was a life adventure. And I'll love to dive into like why. But the main reason I came here was obviously lifestyle, weather. And for me, what I didn't expect is the amount of expat community that was here. I did not expect. I knew there was some, but not to the extent. And I got to say this. I'll say this one line, which is important. I think I've told a lot of people is that in my first 6 months landing in Portugal, here in Cascais, I've met more friends in 6 months than I did 8 years in Sydney.
Wow.
And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think because the expat communities are inviting. They want to make friends. They're not tied in. And they also, when, Dylan and I, if we met on the street, right? And I can tell you're not Portuguese. You can tell, well, I'm definitely not Portuguese, right? Right away, before you even speak and we say hello, we've already have an agreement, an understanding that
Yeah.
you did what I did and I
Yeah.
did what you did, right?
Yeah.
Without even knowing the background or when and so on and so forth. So I think there's that like sort of collectiveness of energy and synergy and like-mindedness that I think adds to it. So how I got into Tiger 21 is actually someone in some of my friends' circle saw what I did. I grew these paddle groups and organized all these events here. One of the things that he saw what I did is he's a member in the States and wanted to start a group here. I didn't know anything about Tiger 21. And when he's told me about this group, I was fascinated that there's even groups like this, right? There's a group of entrepreneurs or wealth creators that get together on a regular basis. We meet once a month, and they share these insights and issues that they're dealing with, whether it be family issues or wealth issues, to talk about it. But they get to share it with other people in trust, in confidentiality, that allows them to have these conversations that you couldn't have with your best friend even, because there's a certain level of finance that you need to enter, but it has the deep conversation that allows them to be able to be open, but also get the perspective of someone who understands the situation. And I found that concept fascinating because of that reason, because we all need perspective, right? That's the thing about life, is that we need perspective. And what I love about the expat community is that you get a different perspective from a different culture. You're South African, originally, that you're going to have a different perspective than I do being Canadian, even though we're part of the Commonwealth. And I think that's what I wanted my kids to be exposed to. And Tiger 21 as a group allows that, because in our group, we got multiple nationalities in there, and their shared perspective allows different perspective on life. And I think we go through basically four fundamental things. Number one, how to preserve the wealth that you just created for your life. These are founders who've exited multiple times. How do you preserve that? Because they're great entrepreneurs building their wealth, but sometimes they're not necessarily great at keeping that. They're
Mhm.
great at creating money and creating wealth, but they're not necessarily keeping. So they got to learn how to preserve that for generations to come. Number two, they still want the drive to maybe create more, for other things, for their families or for life and to impact communities. Three, it's about dealing with relationships because your relationship dynamics changes internally within your partners or your close circle for family, all the way out to your close friends or to the dynamics to the community itself. Once those financial kind of relationship changes a little bit. And four is about impact. What kind of legacy do you want to leave? What kind of philanthropy do you want to have, or the impact in your community or broader to the worldwide community or the interest that you have? So those are the four kind of discussions we tend to kind of come back around each and every single meeting, but just from different perspectives.
Amazing. Yeah, when I moved to Portugal, it was not in vogue. Um, I kind of had people saying like, "Why Portugal? Why on earth would you leave? Would you move there?"
Yeah.
And um, and yeah, over the last 10 years, we've seen this. I don't want to say mass migration, but a lot of people moving and coming here from everywhere. Like it's not just the US, it's everywhere. People
Hmm.
coming here. COVID was a big shift. A lot of people moved at that time and then ended up not leaving. And because it was kind of a nice interim at the time, people thought, okay, well, maybe just for those 2 years, 3 years, I'll go there, and then never left. Which is also super super interesting. Um, what do you think it is now with all the networking that you've done, that's keeping people here, um, that's brought them here? I know for you it was the weather, the visa, and the language, and then obviously the your family, the people being welcoming and everything. But what for the people that you've in your network that you've been speaking to, these like the high net guys, um, what is it do you think that's keeping people here?
I think sometimes what brings people here may be a different answer to what keeps them here. And so, what brings people here is usually, I think, is very similar to what my story is. Is one is like lifestyle. They see like there's an opportunity, but it's an unknown lifestyle unless you kind of lived here for a little while or
Yeah,
experienced it. And let's face it, like when you travel to a country or travel to a city, it's very different than living in that
of
country.
course. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Go to Paris, you're going to go to all the mid heart of Paris. But chances of you being in the middle, living in the middle of Paris is probably not likely, or London, or so on and so forth. So I think when someone's trying to explore a different country, or it's a different city, they got to think of it like, is this where you're going to live and actually spend time with? So I think most people come with a vision of lifestyle and a change. I think the weather definitely helps. I think what keeps people here, for me, from the conversations I've been having a lot of is actually community. I think there's the lifestyle is actually better than they thought. For Americans is, healthcare. I think the healthcare system here is in terms of the cost and what you can get is quite high. Quite low for them to comparatively. Um, I think there's also the unexpectedness of Portugal. Like I think, like you said, like 10 years ago, probably, yeah, it's wasn't on the map. And even 5 years ago was starting to become turn the corner, I would imagine, or especially during COVID. And I can see like, yeah, you don't want to call it migration, but it feels like a bit of a migration from various parts of the world. And people are trying it out. I think because other people they just want a change from their current lifestyle. And there's a mix of people that I see, which is two groups of people. I thought I traveled a lot in terms of moving, but when I meet most of the people I met, there are people who have done this 8 times or five
Yeah.
times. They've traveled a lot of places and they end up and settling here. I don't, and there's also a group of people who this is their first time moving, right? This is the very first time ever leaving their home state or their home city. And so there's these two dynamics that are kind of at play. But I think when you think about surrounding yourself with people, just like the Tiger Group, for example, you play at a different game because the conversations and your reality is normalized to the group that you hang out with. So I always talk about like the importance of um the five closest people. You're the average of the five closest people.
Yeah.
So in my podcast, the Wabi Sabi, the art of imperfection, we talk about that. We talk about like how important it is to live an imperfect life. And one of the things though, what lifts you to have a greater life is the five people that surround you, because your friends, the conversation they have, the optimism or the pessimism that they have influences how you think. And so when you come to an expat community in Portugal, you are surrounded by people who've done this multiple times. This is the norm, right? Moving cities is the norm, or going to different places is the norm. And so you kind of go through that process of going, oh, like maybe my reality or how I lived the last 40 years of my life isn't necessarily a true reality for other people. And you get to expose to different communities. So you being South African, you're going to have a different viewpoint on life and the world view. And, someone from Australia or someone from Germany or someone from, Istanbul is going to have a different reality as well. Again, it's not right or wrong. It's just more a different perspective. And I think what draws people here is to recognize that you start to normalize those conversations that, hey, the issues that you're dealing with isn't unique to you. It's affecting in different cultures, but how people handle that is different. And I think that's what keeps people here, is that the freshness of that. I will also say Portugal is beautiful as well. Like the landscape is undiscovered. Yeah. And so that's going to keep people here. I think there's a pace. You call this, Portugal, the simple life. And I'm sure we'll get to that. I think there's that simplicity of like life that, most of us come from in the expat world is usually from a hustle and bustle world, right? There's a lot of fast-paced movement. It took me a while to adjust, I must admit, to kind of feel the pace difference. And we can talk about it, but until you experience it, you don't realize there's a different pace of how I used to function in Sydney versus how I function in Cascais. And it took me at least 2 years to adapt. Or I can get used to the pace very easily, but it's also like finding the medium that's right, between business and life and relaxation and retirement. All these things is a balance. And it depends on what stage of your life you're in, you can kind of find it, but you also got to recalibrate the temperature gauge in your own head around all of those aspects around life.
Between my job as a realtor at Portugal Realty and hosting this podcast, life is pretty busy. But lately I've been receiving so many messages from people that want to know more about buying property here on Portugal's Silver Coast that I've got to do something about it. So starting now, for subscribers only, I'm offering up a 30-minute session per day. That's 5 30-minute sessions for a one-on-one meeting to talk about buying property here on Portugal's beautiful Silver Coast. This is for subscribers only. So please subscribe to book your session and get in touch with us through the links below via WhatsApp or email to book your session today. I'll be happy to speak to you. It's for subscribers only and it's completely free. There's something very interesting and you alluded to it earlier where you spoke about you wanted to move to a place where your kids are going to be welcome. Your wife is going to be welcome. You're going to be welcome. And one thing, that I'd like to kind of dig into, but is the Portuguese people. And when you talk about people coming here from all over the world, and kind of just managing to find their way, managing to find their tribe, managing to find their sweet spot for them. And you're in Cascais, I'm up on the Silver Coast. You've got it's a small country, but it's quite a different country. It's quite diverse.
Yeah.
And you're seeing this north to south, east to west in Portugal, where people are just managing to find this sweet spot in this country that works for them. That, like you mentioned, everybody comes from a different perspective, but in the end, it's kind of the same. And you also mentioned the word community. People are just so desperate for real community. This wouldn't be possible without the Portuguese people.
Absolutely.
Kind of giving people the space to be and to do. And that's something quite special. What has your experience been of the Portuguese people here, how they've welcomed you and your family and how they've kind of allowed us expats the space to do what we do and to have the lives that we have here.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to use the word respect. And I think that's really important for the discussion as we kind of go into this. I think one of the things that you look at the bulks of people and that come here, and some people do go, right? Go back or move on. One of the things that I find interesting is that Portugal, I find, is less of a transient place. Like there's certain places that are transient, where it's like Dubai,
Yeah.
London. Like a lot of people come for a couple of years and they kind of go. I've been here for 3 years, and sure, have there been people who come in and gone? Yes, but it's not the majority. If anything, it's a minority that actually come and don't stay,
Yeah.
right? And I've had this discussion, like, what happens when our kids all graduate? Like, do we stay? Like, where else are we going to go? Like, and so, right at the moment, most people don't actually have a good answer to that, right? Most people don't have an answer because they feel like they found some sort of paradise. However, having said that, though, I kind of look at it, and this is just my opinion, of course, right? So I don't have no data behind this, but I find like the people who come here to Portugal, they didn't enjoy it for whatever reason, or they just felt like they need to move on. Most of and this is anecdotally, I find that those people are usually people who either didn't expect, they didn't match their expectation, or they were hoping to see Portugal the same way they were back home, wherever home was.
Yeah.
And when I say respect, I think what the most important thing of moving, not just to Portugal, but to any country, I've done this a couple of times, is to be able to come here, to respect the culture, to respect the traditions of what this culture is mean to, rather than trying to change it. Right. I feel there's a lot of energy of trying to get people to change, like come here and go, oh, but this is inefficient. This is not working. Listen, I have those frustrations too, but also too, like it's not my place to necessarily want to change that for them, because there's a reason. So that respect of making sure, do you understand, like we have to integrate to their way of life, not for them to integrate to our way of life, whatever our way of life is,
Yeah.
because there's too many perspectives. And I think that's, for me, is ultimately very important. I think the Portuguese as a people, as a culture, as a nationality, has been so inviting for us to come, to be able to. They want to participate. They want to learn as well. For majority of the part, they want to learn, and they embrace it, and they're sharing this with us, which I love. We would not. You're absolutely right. We would not have the opportunity to do that unless they welcomed us in the first place.
Yeah.
And I think different places in Portugal attract certain different types of where you are in your life. Whether you're in retirement versus you have kids, or you have no kids, or a single, or an entrepreneur. Like, I think you end up in in different places around Portugal, because I think it attracts that hive mentality of, not hive mentality, the community, the right community that suits that particular nature that you're in, and also the where you are in your life cycle.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about you and your family a little bit more, because you
Sure.
you had the three reasons for coming here. Um, you mentioned how you were surprised at the communities that you found here. What else has surprised you about Portugal? What else have you discovered here in this place that you weren't expecting?
I didn't expect so many people speak English. like, I mean, I kind of heard that they spoke, but it's been more and more. I don't know if you've noticed it, but I'm finding it more and more people speak English, and that's one of the reasons why I struggle learning Portuguese, because no matter how much you
Yeah,
try, they're going to speak
exactly.
English to you anyways.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but so there's a plus and a minus, right? The plus is that, you can get around 90% of the time, just knowing English. The trouble becomes more about, when you're talking to someone in government, or you're trying to get some work done, with workers. But other than that, like, you can navigate. But the negative of that is that you never really have to integrate, knowing the language. And so that's the negative I find. So, that's something I'm working on. What else surprised me? I think what surprised me, to me, is just how diverse the landscape is. Like, in terms of, like, you're only about an hour, 90 minutes from where I live.
Yeah, yeah.
And, Portugal is a very, very small country. You kind of alluded to this before. Like, it's such a small country, but to explore, like, from one region to another, they're so different.
Yeah.
Whereas I lived in a country, which Australia, which is a freaking continent, which is huge, right? Bigger
It's
than the United
massive. Yeah.
States,
Yeah.
right? It's massive and it's diverse, but you got to travel a long distance to see that diversity.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas here, you just got to go. Like, I mean, I've done some day trips to Evra, to Obidos, to like they're only an hour drive to more. Like they're only hour drives, but yet they're so different. Certain things are the same, but they're so different in terms of its history and its culture. So that's what I find kind of fascinating, and that's what I loved about for a small country, it's so unique in its way, in terms of going from Porto all the way down to the Algarve. Like there's just so many differences between each city, even the difference between Lisbon and Cascais. I know this is this is kind of silly, but the difference between the weather between Cascais and Lisbon, which is only 30-minute drive,
Yeah.
is ridiculous, right? It could be 30 degrees Celsius in Lisbon and it's 25 degrees in Cascais, which I love, by the way. Like, I don't need to have the hot Australian summer. I'm happy with the weather that we have in Cascais, but that's like subtle differences. Even where I live right now, I live just near the edge of in Cascais. I just live on near the edge of Sintra and Cascais, not right on the edge. But if I just drive 5 minutes or 10 minutes north of where I
Yeah.
am, living in that, it's like now you're all of a sudden in a little bubble of this in Sintra Mountains, or you get all the
With the mist and the
humidity and
fog. Yeah.
yeah, and that's only 5 minutes. So those are like subtle little differences that you don't
Yeah.
realize. I just lucked out because I'd never been here before, but I lucked out where I chose. But if I didn't know, like I got friends who came in, didn't listen, and they have a house literally 10 minutes from where I am, and they're like, "Is your place that windy? No. Is your place that humid? No." And
Yeah.
it's only a 10-minute difference. It's
Yeah.
like there's like a line that you don't want to cross
Yeah.
when it comes to if you don't like humidity.
Amazing. I mean, and I mean, yeah, we talk about the shifting demographic of people that have been moving to Portugal, and like I mean, as you know, I'm in real estate, and when I started, it was mostly people looking to retire.
Hmm.
In the last 7 years, that's been that demographic. There's no real demographic now. It's everybody, and it's people coming with their kids, people coming in the prime of their careers, people looking to start new things, which is super interesting and diverse. But how's it been moving with kids? Is it what you wanted for your family?
Yeah, I told you about the three reasons, but there was a fourth reason, right? The fourth reason is that I wanted my kids to experience what it is like to be a world citizen. And so let me expand on that. One of the things, they were 13 and 10 at the time, and I knew that if I waited another year, which my daughter would have been in, going into high school, I felt like her school network friends would have been a little bit too close knit for me to kind of tear away. Of course, I could have done it, but it wouldn't have been fair. And so I did that I wanted to do it at that time. And what I mean by world citizen is that I wanted them to feel and know and embrace this feeling of that when they get older and when they decide to have their own life, their own career, they're not going to be afraid to take a job in Singapore or go back to Australia or go to, Russia or wherever they want to go to, for the career or move or partner, because they've already done it.
Yeah.
Yes, will it be hard? Yeah, it will be hard. But to remind them that, yeah, you did it when you were 13 and 10. Like you've done it. You integrated. It took a little while, but you were fine. Like, and so you kind of done the hard thing young, and so that the hard thing in the future isn't. So for me to move to Portugal wasn't as hard as my first time moving to Australia, right? Or moving from one side of the country, Perth, to Sydney. I did that. And so each one of these moves makes the next move easier. Of course, it was hard to move here, right? But it's not as hard if it was the first time I ever done it. And so that's what I really wanted to teach them. And the second thing that I think that really learned from being a world citizen, what you said was a benefit, which was unexpected, was also just going to a school, international school, where these kids are mixture or multi different nationalities. And what's really surprising, not surprising, now that I'm in Europe, it's not surprising, but for anybody who doesn't live in Europe, you recognize that most kids actually know like 3 to 5 languages, right? And that's the norm. And so we talked about normalization in just maybe 10 minutes ago. Like that's their norm now. So now they're going to grow up to recognize like now you know 2 languages, maybe 3 languages. Like, they'll know English, they'll know Portuguese, and maybe they'll learn French or whatever. But that's the norm, not like that's amazing. Like to me, that's amazing. but to them it should be more normalized. Like you need to minimize learn three languages. I
Yeah.
think that is what I mean by world citizen, right? Because for them it gives them more adaptability, more movement. And I'll tell you a story. What got me into this road and why I do what I, travel and do what I do is like there was about 25 years ago, there was a speaker. His name was Dr. DeMartini, and he came to our
Mhm.
school and he spoke in this gymnasium and he said this one line. He's a speaker. He's like a, inspirational kind of speaker. And he speaks like 300 days a year and he travels the world doing this. And he said this one line. He said that, the world, I see the world as my home. And each country I go to is just a different room in the house. And I was like, and for whatever reason, that stuck with me 25 years. Like for 25 years, that's been sitting. I'm like, oh, I love that. I like that a
Yeah.
lot. I love that way of thinking. And that's how I see it. And I want my kids to kind of feel that way too, that you moving to a different country is just, it's just a different house. There's just a different room in the house. And with technology, with FaceTime, social media, we're more connected than we ever were. When I first moved, we didn't have all that when I first moved to Australia. I think I got my first cell phone or mobile phone when I landed on Australia. We didn't have all that technology, but now
Yeah.
it's like we're so interconnected. You and I are like 90 minutes away. We're having a conversation, recording this, and then
Yeah.
people who are watching this is like halfway around the world watching us having a
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
Like this is crazy times.
Yeah. Amazing. Is that something else that you touched on, and maybe you can unpack that a little bit more? Um, you spoke about how, pace of life, Sydney was like up here, and coming here, it's
Mm,
kind of recalibrating, and it was the same for me. Like, um, living in Johannesburg, and I mean, I wasn't in a corner suite or something. I was working a normal job, but it's just go, 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 go. You don't the concept for me of stopping for lunch, like we do here in Portugal, was just you didn't do that. Like I still remember the first time working with my colleagues, my Portuguese colleagues, and they said, "Yo, come, we're going to go for lunch." And I said, "No, I've got a sandwich. I'll eat at my desk." They said, "No, you don't do that here. Like, let's go." And you
yeah,
go for an
yeah.
hour and you stop. But I mean, how has that changed for you? And like, we need balance. We need that time to breathe. We need that time to recenter. How does Portugal help you with that? And how's that experience been for you?
Yeah, like I'm going to use an example from like my Tiger 21 group and my members, right? These guys and girls have spent their whole life like hustling hard to kind of create these amazing businesses. And they sold their businesses and now they're kind of at a place. And I think Portugal is like the perfect place for them, right? Because it allows them to have the lifestyle they want to have for their families. And you're right, more and more families are moving. Like, and that's why all these international schools that we have like 10 international schools in Cascais, they're all full, right? You can hardly get in a space. So that's already showing the trend of where, families are coming. And so these ultra high net worth people have spent a lot of their life building their businesses. Now they get to enjoy their life. It's like a perfect place for them to like sit back, reset, and go, what's next? But it's not like most of us don't. For them, it's like we're taking that may take 1 to 2 years, if not longer, to kind of reset, right? Because you've been going so hard and it's really hard to just come down. I'm sure we all experience that to something. If we're all busy and you go on your holiday, do you like relax on the very first day? Most of us who are like really hard hustlers tend not to. It takes like 3 days before you kind of like learn to unwind a little bit
Yeah.
before and then before you know it, the holiday's over. And so I think for these members, and which is the example of what I give about Portugal, is that it forces you to slow down. A perfect example of this. Um, sorry, so let me finish that sentence. I'll give you an example. Forcing you to slow down is that it forces you to slow down in a way that allows you to think, allows you to gain the perspective to hear from all these different people to allow you to make the right choice moving forward, right? Because most of the time when you're hustling, when you're in 20s, you're kind of making decisions on the fly. Where now, like you get to a certain age and a certain life, you're like, maybe we should just like we only got 1 or 2 good moves here in a sense, and we got to make sure that's impactful. That's going to be, you don't need to constantly chase. So that takes the time. And so the example I give around how that's demonstrated on daily life is you asked me what's surprising, and I forgot to say this, which is going to dinner, right? You reminded me about lunch, like going to dinner. Um, in most of the world, it's like you go into a nice restaurant and it's like, okay, how fast can I turn these
The
guests over
stable.
so I can
Yeah.
fit into the second one, right? Here is completely different. It's like I eat early. And unfortunately, most restaurants don't open until 7, right? So we get the first sitting. You walk in a restaurant, our family is usually the first people in, but everything's reserved, but they might not be coming in until 8 or 9, you know? And so, but when we sit down, they're not trying to rush us. If
Mm.
anything, we're trying to rush them. Like, can we have our food faster? Can we have our bill? They won't come with the bill unless you ask for it. And so, like, that pace has changed, right? Like, so that's the difference where we're used to being pushed out. Here, it's like they want you to stay. You can take as long as you want because there's no turnover. There's no force to like, we got to earn more dollars here, right? We want you to enjoy this place. Now, not all restaurants like this, but there's that sense. And just that's one small example of how the pace changes and it forces you to go, oh, supposed to enjoy my nice glass of wine and enjoy my food, not try to rush out the door and try to eat this in 15 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's that pace. And if you apply that to every aspect of your life, sometimes it's detrimental, let's face it. But but everything out, you start to realize that you have to recalibrate, right? And also your expectations, like your expectation changes of what's expected in terms and then you also reevaluate your own life of recognizing like, you know, do I need that more balance in my life? And
Yeah.
again, it depends on what age you're at and also what life cycle you're at. This could be very helpful for majority of us, but unhelpful if you're in a phase of like, I need to push. And this might be more challenging state.
Yeah. But and then you do have the side of you've got Lisbon, you've got the startup scene, there's stuff happening. So for the guys that want to
Yeah.
hustle, it's
It's
there,
there. It's
you know.
there. Yeah.
And that's where again, when you talk about, I mean, you spoke about Portugal as a diverse landscape, but it's such a diverse country in terms of for whatever stage of life I'm at, there's a place, there's a community, there's a thing. And again, once again, we're able to have that space here because we're allowed to be. People are happy that we're here, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, the startup scene seems like it's kicking off, and I can really see, the next 5 to 10 years, that space growing and attracting more and more, young entrepreneurs to kind of make a difference in that landscape. And I can see this, and there's a lot of excitement around there. And I think it almost needs that little shift to happen to attract the right talents to be here and to like almost educate or help the startup scene. I think Portugal is a great place to be at the moment from that perspective.
Yeah, and then just coming back to the people because you're seeing it in the startup scene. I see it where I live. There's just this wonderful, you talk about you wanting your kids to be citizens of the world, and it's kind of like Portugal allows you to do that. I don't know if you've read the book, The First Global Village,
No, I haven't.
but it's a book about how, when you talk about global villages, and you spoke about those kind of transient global villages of like Dubai and London and these kind of places, and Portugal was the first one. Like back in the day, Portugal was this trading kind of doorway
Yeah.
to, you had the Silk Route, you had the spices, you had the Americas. And at any given time, there were people from hundreds of countries in Portugal. So it's all about being the first global village. And we're seeing that continue in a different way, in a different framework. But it's this place where everybody can just be and they're allowed to be and they're given the space to be. And you can be a global citizen and be in a place where the weather is lovely and it's safe and the food is good and no one's chasing you off your table. And there's just a beautiful balance of I can work, I can graft, I can hustle, but I can breathe and I can
Yes.
enjoy the simple things. And it's not very many places that get that right. And Portugal just seems to, yeah, get it right somehow naturally.
Yeah, it's one of those there's some such diversity, and I think it attracts so many different types of people, which is only going to enhance this country, I feel. And that I think that's the attractiveness, right? The Portuguese people just allows that to occur, and the communities are growing, and I see it growing in the right direction. I feel like it's respecting the culture that is here, but also being able to um, really see the landscape for what it is, and take in all this beauty to actually appreciate life for what it is too as well. And I think our commercialization of our Western world in certain countries like, the States or Canada or even Australia, like I found like sometimes we've taken to such an extreme in terms of productivity and commercialization. We're getting to that point of like it's leading to burnout. And I
Mm,
do worry about like, what that would do to the kids, in terms
yeah.
of, being raised in that environment. And that's, partly that's one of the reasons we kind of left. We wanted them to kind of have a different exposure to kind of then compare the life. Like an example is like my daughter has top marks. She is probably, one of the top students in her school, in her class. But she also like has a good head on her shoulders. It's like she's not trying to like get into these top Ivy League schools. Like that's not going to interest her. And she's following her passion to be able to go, no, like what I really want to do is I want to work. I want to, build my resume. I want to do something that I'm interested in. And so she's not necessarily following the path of like what's expected of society, right?
Hmm.
And she's following a path of what she wants. And I think that if I wasn't here, I don't know if that would have been the case. She's possibly going to like we've been looking at schools at Scotland and Switzerland and
Hmm.
and Madrid, like that. If you talked back to me 4 years ago, like that could be the
Yeah, yeah.
potential where my daughter could be going to university or even not. No way. We probably, I guarantee you, with 90% probability, we would have went to a school in Sydney, right? It would have been the choice of these three schools.
Yeah.
And so for her and my son to have those like just even the thought of going to some of these universities of interest in a foreign country, man, I think that in itself is like a win for them to
Mm,
kind of set themselves up for them for life, and that's what I really want for them.
amazing. Laurence, what's one thing that you would like people to remember and to take away from our conversation?
I think the most important thing, I think we talked a lot about communities and the importance of community. As I see the power every single month as I work with these high net worth individuals every month, is that these shared conversations can change your trajectory of your financial life, can change the trajectory of your relationships in your life, and not only just that person's relationship, but their families, and most likely for generations to come. And I want to leave with that thought because it's so important that you find a group of people, a community of people that can support you, but also challenge you in a way that allows you to think in different perspective. And no matter where you are, no matter where parts of your life, or no matter what community you're in, find those groups of people. I find that for me personally, moving and being a Canadian and then, and also being an Australian and now, being in Portugal has really shaped my, my book of life, I guess. And I'm really glad I made this move to Portugal because it added another chapter that I wouldn't have had. And I think that if you're going to take away from anything, it's not about moving. It's about finding a community that resonates with you, that can share and challenge you and support you at the same time.
Awesome. I love that. How can people follow you, Laurence? Online, get in touch, see what you're up to.
Yeah, I'm just started on LinkedIn in a sense of I've been started heavily posting on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn if you want to get in touch with me. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, and yeah, you can go to
Cool.
lawrencetam.com to see what I do there too. So
Brilliant. I'll put some links in the show notes and people can reach out if they'd like to chat.
yeah, I appreciate that. And I think if anybody who's a high net worth individual who is thinking about, moving to Europe, like give me a shout. I'll happy to walk you through what that could look like, and connect you with certain people that might be in your situation to help you go through that process.
Awesome. Thank you. Finally, Laurence, last question and a question that we ask all of our guests. Portugal, the simple life. Why?
The people, the scenery, the pace, the energy, something about it. They're just you got to experience it. It's not something that you can put words to it. I think you got to live it and you got to be here for it. And there's challenges as well. It's not like I don't want to sound like I'm promoting like, oh, this everything's so amazing. No, like there's always gonna be challenges, no matter where you are, no matter what your life. But it's like the trade-off though, man, it's I wouldn't
Yeah.
trade it for anything else.
I like the title of your podcast, The Art of Imperfection. I feel like that relates quite well to Portugal. It's not perfect, but there's an art to the imperfection here, which is a beautiful thing. So yeah.
Yeah. It's wabi sabi is like a philosophy that I embrace. It's like you got to embrace the imperfection. Nothing's perfect. And if you have this high expectation of perfection, like you're going to live a miserable life. So I think it's about how do you embrace the imperfection of life and then go with the flow. But doesn't mean you shouldn't challenge it, but it's also like don't let it get you down, but you just make it for what it's worth. I mean, we only get one life, and let's just make sure we have a great one.
Yeah, I love that. Laurence, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. Thanks for being on the podcast.
I appreciate you having me on.
And I'm going to let you call it.
Well, that's a wrap.
So thank you once again to our guest, and thank you to all of you for listening. Please subscribe, share with your friends, give us a thumbs up, and please leave a comment or a review. We always love to hear from you. Don't forget, Portugal The Simple Life also has a magazine, so download it. It's for free. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode, and as we say in Portugal, sejas bem-vindo. Welcome to The Simple Life.